This is Unit 7, Section 7.1. We're going to do an introduction to polyhedron. So we're going to start looking at three-dimensional figures. So similar to what we did at the beginning of Unit 6 and the beginning of Unit 5, where we started classifying things first. That's kind of what we're going to start out with here so that we're naming things properly. So we'll start out with our introduction here, and then we'll continue into our volume formulas. So our first day is really to be able to identify the parts and specifically be able to name some of these objects. And so we're going to talk about 5 main objects when we look at three-dimensional figures. And some of the times we might combine 2 of the figures to make a composite figure. But basically all figures can break down into these 5 basic three-dimensional objects. The first one is a prism. And so a prism is a solid with 2 bases that are parallel and congruent. We name the prism for the base. This figure is called a triangular prism because the parallel bases are the triangles. And so if I look at this piece, this triangle here and this triangle down at the bottom are the 2 bases that are being connected by these rectangles. So that's why we name this a triangular prism, because the 2 bases are these 2 triangles here. If we only had 1 base, this would become a pyramid. And so a pyramid is a solid with 1 base and then triangular faces that meet at a point called the apex. And so the very tip top has a special name, just like in a triangle or a quadrilateral or a pentagon, we talked about having vertices. Now we have vertices, but a special one called an apex. These are also named for the base. So this figure is now a triangular pyramid because the base is a triangle. So if I look at these pieces, I have a triangle meeting up at here. That's the apex. And so the pyramids that we think about in Egypt are square pyramids because their bases are not triangular. They have 4 sides that are connected up to the tip-top apex. So that would be a square pyramid. Then we have our objects that are kind of connected, but now have curves. And so the cylinder is similar to a prism in that it has 2 bases that are congruent and parallel, but now we name it as a cylinder when we have 2 circular bases. So when I have a circle and another circle that are congruent to each other, this would be a cylinder. The cone is similar to our pyramid, and so this has a circular base. And so this kind of looks like a party hat or an upside down ice cream cone, but this tip-top spot is still called the apex. And so that's why these 2 are kind of similar and these 2 are kind of similar. The sphere is our 5th and final polyhedron, and it's called this because it is a solid in which each point is the same distance, equidistant from a center point. So if I put this here, this would be like taking a circle and rotating and rotating and rotating around. So every point touching this sphere is the same distance apart. It's tons of congruent circles there. And so our object today is to classify each solid. So we want to name it and we want to shade in the bases. All right, so the main thing we want to think of are what kind of bases. Do we have 1? Do we have 2? And so on the first one, I have a point up here. So as soon as I see an apex, this is going to be a pyramid. And so when I look at the base here across from the apex, I have a rectangle here. So I'm going to name this a rectangular pyramid. So as soon as I see an apex, I know it's either a pyramid or a cone. When I don't see a circular base, that means I have to have some name here. So I know this base is a rectangle. It has 4 angles that are congruent here. So we have a rectangular pyramid. On number 2, I have an apex. Okay, so I'm thinking pyramid or cone. And when I look across from the apex and I see a circle, that confirms that this is a cone. On number 3, I don't have an apex. I don't have a point where all these are coming together. So this has to be a prism or a cylinder. And when I don't see circles here, I'm seeing a triangle congruent to another triangle here. So these are my two bases. Again, I'm shading in my bases. That's part of my credit here. This is going to be a triangular and a prism because there's two bases. So we're just naming this. Apex, prism. Oh my gosh. Apex, pyramid, two bases, prism. All right, let's look at number 4. Now on number 4, again, my eye is drawn when I see an apex. So when I look at the bottom, this is almost circular, but it has some segments here. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 segments. So when I look at naming this, the apex tells me this is a pyramid, and then the base tells me what kind of pyramid. This is going to be a hexagonal because I have a hexagon. So hexagon, and then this is a pyramid because of the apex. So I'm not concerned with how you pronounce this. I think I've heard hexagonal and I've heard hexagonal. But as long as we recognize this is not a rectangle, this is not a triangle, this is all about the hexagon, we should be okay. On number 5, okay, I don't have any apex, and I do have one base here that's circular and a second base here that's circular. So it's not a prism because the bases are circles. When I have two bases that are circles, that's going to be my cylinder. On number 6, okay, I don't have an apex, and I have one base here, opposite another base here, or this is where it's kind of strange. I could actually say I have a base here and a base here. And I kind of like those better because then I see the 4 congruent rectangles kind of wrapped around there. But either way, because I have two bases, this is going to be a prism, and either base that I pick will be a rectangle. So this is going to be a rectangular prism, two bases. All right, on number 7, okay, no apex, no point at the top or side here. And then when I look at the bases, I'm looking for congruent. So if I tried to do this one and the top one, those are not the same object. So I'm actually looking at this trapezoid. I see one here, and then I see one, I'm going to change colors. Do you see it on the other side here? So I have two trapezoids that are parallel and congruent to each other. So this is going to be a trapezoidal prism. And prism because there's two of them. On number 8, we have an apex. So as soon as I see apex, I should be thinking cone or pyramid. I don't see a circle, I see a rectangle here. So just like on number 1, this is going to be another rectangular pyramid. On number 9, I don't see an apex, nothing where these triangles are coming together. So I have either a cylinder or a prism, and I'm looking for parallel congruent bases. And so now I'm seeing this object over here across from this object over here. And so because we have two congruent and parallel bases, this will be a prism, and we name it by this object here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That'll be a pentagonal. So pentagon for the 5-sided, pentagonal for being a 3-dimensional figure, and it's a prism, pentagonal prism. And then our last 3 here, okay, as soon as I look at the first one, I kind of see that apex up at top, so I think of the base down here. All right, the base is not a circle, so it's not a cone. This base has 3 sides, so this will be a triangular pyramid. On number 11, okay, no apex, and then I'm drawn to this triangle across from this triangle. So I have 2 bases across from each other, similar to number 3. In fact, that might be the same picture, I just rotated it. This is the triangular prism again. 2 bases, and those bases are triangles. And the last one I think is pretty quick to recognize. This is not a pyramid or a prism. There's no bases, no apex. This is our sphere. Please, ooh, boy, lost the P there. Please do not call this a ball or round. This has a name. So in the past, I've had students that lost a point because they named it a ball. Yes, if I have like a kickball or something like that, it is in the shape of a sphere. When we're naming an object, we want to make sure we're being mathematically accurate. All right, let me know if you have any questions, and we'll practice labeling and naming our polyhedron.